Hello, my name is Keerthana Danasekaran, and I go to Northville High School in the USA. I'm an upcoming junior, and I'm doing an online interview with Dr. Mark Hallett, who is Senior Investigator in the Human Motor Control section of the Medical Neurology branch, and National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes in the USA. And Dr. Hallett has served as the Editor-in-Chief of Clinical Neurophysiology in 2000 to 2008. So I guess we'll get started. So my first question, Dr. Hallett, was in your editorial, you predicted that reviewing manuscripts would remain a manual process, even if the submissions were made online. So do you think, is there any room for a non-manual automatic process to evaluate papers?
Right. So, so I'm very happy to participate in this interview and talk about the old days when I was editor-in-chief of Clinical Neurophysiology. Now, you have to remember that around that time, largely everything was on paper. Journals received manuscripts only in paper. Electronic was just at the onset. So manuscripts came in paper and they came to the office, and then we had multiple copies, and we sent some copies out to the different reviewers. But it was clear, even when I started in 2000, that there was going to be an electronic revolution and that things were going to be done more and more on the computer and on the internet. And so what I was predicting at that time is that even though we would be doing more, that a lot of the reviewers probably would print out the paper, even if they got it electronically. They probably would print it out and read it rather than reading it on the screen. That's what I was predicting would happen at that time.
All right.
And actually, that was what was happening at that time. In fact, a lot of the different reviewers complained that we sent it to them electronically, and they wanted it in paper. And I said, well, if you want it in paper, you just have to print it out yourself. And they objected to that because they didn't want to print it out. But finally, people started printing it out themselves. But eventually, of course, people stopped doing that. I mean, it was as people got more comfortable with reading things on their computer screen, they stopped printing out the papers to actually do the review. So what I predicted was, well, when we started doing this, people would still print it out, and they did, but only for a number of years. And as people got more comfortable with doing things on the computer, that gradually disappeared. Now, I bet there probably still are some old timers that do that, but there's probably not very many. Almost everybody these days is quite comfortable with reading things on the computer screen, but that was not the case 20 years ago.
Right, definitely. All right. So my next question was, in another editorial of yours, you inferred that some reviewers didn't review their manuscripts promptly, even though they expressed their commitment. So what system would effectively reduce these types of incidents? And I understand that the manuscript review is a voluntary activity.
Right. So it certainly is the case that when authors send manuscripts to a journal, they're looking for a rapid review. They've generally spent a long time working on their manuscript, and they're very anxious to find out what's going on, whether it's going to be accepted or not in the journal. So they all want a fast turnaround. And journals want to have a fast turnaround because they want their authors to know that they will get a fast return. I mean, if a journal gets a reputation that it always takes 4 or 5 months to get a response, then they're not going to wind up getting very many manuscripts, because people will say, I don't want to wait that long, I want to get it faster.
Yeah.
So when an editor is seeking reviewers, then the editor wants to find reviewers who will agree to do the review relatively promptly.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of reviewers understand what that means. And so if they accept a review, they will know that they have time to do it.
Right.
And will do it on time. And there are other reviewers, there's actually quite a lot of them, who want to do the review, who say, oh, sure, I can do it in the time that you tell me, but actually don't. They have more things to do than they think. They have other types of priorities that come up, and so that they don't do it in a timely fashion. And that gets everybody a bit upset, because the authors want to know, the editor wants to know, to keep his journal moving quickly. So it isn't a good situation when that happens, but it happens a lot, I'm afraid. It still happens. I think that there are a number of people who are very good, excellent reviewers, excellent scientists, who see a paper, they love to review it, they say they can do it in a timely fashion, but they just don't do it.
Right.
Other things come along. I mean, maybe they know, maybe at the time they think they can, but then some other work comes along that takes a higher priority, and they wind up not doing it. So we certainly hope as editors that reviewers will do things in a timely fashion. It doesn't always work out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. My next question was, how do you determine or sense if a reviewer is passionate and committed, or if they're timeless and inefficient?
Well, yes, how to tell whether a reviewer is passionate about the subject. That you can, there are two ways of doing that. One is by past experience. I mean, many of the reviewers that an editor uses are people that he or she knows. Mm-hmm. So after being involved with a lot of international organizations over the years, as many editors are, you get to know a lot of people, and you know what things, what topics people are interested in, or what they really like. And of course, it's always better to send an article to someone who's passionate about it, because then they will take a real interest in it. And then you can tell to some extent about whether they're passionate, depending upon how detailed and thoughtful they are in the actual review. Mm-hmm. So some people just don't pay much attention to it and dash it off, where other people really dig in and think about it deeply and will give thoughtful comments. So you can tell from the review itself how passionate somebody is about that particular topic. And of course, that then gives the editor education for other manuscripts that will come in the future on similar topics.
Yeah, definitely. My next question, Dr. Hallett, was, how did switching the manuscript process to online make your editor's life more enjoyable or challenging?
Well, it was both. Right. So as you're pointing out, I did write an editorial that when I started it, when I stopped being editor in 2008. And in 2008, I told the story of what happened during the 8 years that I was editor. And in the beginning, everything was on paper. Mm-hmm. There was nothing on any type of computer system. And at that time, I mentioned before, the manuscripts had to be sent in multiple copies. Then we had to send them out to the reviewers. We spent a lot of time mailing things and mail delays, particularly when you're dealing with things international. Sometimes things got lost in the mail.
Right.
So there were lots of lots of problems with that system, of course. Now, I like computers, and I think they're good. And so when we had the opportunity to go to a computerized system, I jumped for it, and I thought that it would be nice, it would save us time, it would be efficient, and so on. So Elsevier, who is the publisher that we've been working on for the entire time that Clinical Neurophysiology has been published, had a electronic system that they thought would work. And Clinical Neurophysiology was one of the first journals to take it on.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there was a learning curve. It was not only a new system, but the whole idea of going online was new. So it was a pioneering experience. There were lots of bugs in the system that gave us a lot of problems. And we were just beginning to get a good sense of how to use it. And then after about maybe a year and a half or something, then we got a call or an email from the editor, from the publisher, and said, look, this system is just not working very well. We're going to drop it and go to another electronic system. Well, I wasn't too excited about that, but we did. And the new electronic system proved to be much better in the end, but it took, of course, more time to build up experience with that new system. That new system is really the forerunner of our current system now. It's been through multiple versions since then, but that second system that we took on was the first version of what Elsevier is currently using these days.
Mm-hmm. So my next question was, how did the open access system, in which authors need to pay a fee for readers to read their article, change the number of articles published? And what is your prediction about the access to medical journals, including Clinical Neurophysiology, in the future?
Yes, so the open access model is something that's been increasing over the last decade or so. It actually had its genesis with Harold Varmus, who at the time was NIH director. And he had the view, which a number of people have now accepted, that it should be the reader, it should be the author that pays for publication rather than the reader. So the ordinary way that you think about it is that the author publishes and readers buy it and then read it. Mm-hmm. He had the opposite view, that readers should get it for free and the author should pay to publish. Now, part of the logic of that was him thinking from an NIH point of view that NIH people would have government money that would allow them the money to pay for the publication. That's not necessarily true, but that was his idea. But a lot of people sort of bought onto that idea, and it gradually developed and became more and more popular. Mm-hmm. Now, there are, at the present time, two types of journals, or three types of journals. One type of journal is entirely reader pay. Another type of journal is entirely author pay or entirely open access. Mm-hmm. And there are also hybrid journals that are both. Mm-hmm. Now, Clinical Neurophysiology at present is both. It's a hybrid. So that an author, if he or she wants, can not necessarily pay for it, but the readers would then have to buy a subscription.
All right.
And then there are authors that do pay for open access, and for those articles, readers can get it for free right away.
Right.
And then when we started the second journal in the IFCN, Clinical Neurophysiology Practice, for that journal, we decided to make it entirely open access from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that journal is 100% open access. The authors all pay, and the readers all get it for free.
All right.
And with Clinical Neurophysiology Practice, the focus of that journal is for people that are in the practice of clinical neurophysiology. And one of the goals of the IFCN is education. And we thought that this would help education a lot, because people would be able to get all of this free educational material and useful material for practice without having to pay for it.
Right.
That does put a burden on the author. And of course, there are a number of authors that have difficulty coming up with the money to pay for publication.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, they may go to a different journal, because one that would be reader pay instead of author pay.
Right.
So it's still a process in evolution. There is some feeling that in the future, everything will be open access.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened yet. There's still a mixture of these different types of journals, but there's definitely an evolution toward open access.
Mm-hmm.
So at the present time, authors do have a choice, and if you move to a full open access system, you are likely to lose some contributions, because some authors don't want to pay for it.
Right.
But in the future, if everybody has to pay for it, no matter what, then everybody will be on an equal footing in that regard.
Right. So, do you have anything you want to say to the audience?
Well, yes, in terms of other things, of course, I stopped being editor in 2008, so that was a long time ago. Well, it was not that long ago. Since then, I have been involved with the IFCN. I was the president for 4 years, and now I'm the current past president. And while I was the president, we did start Clinical Neurophysiology Practice, so I had the opportunity to get that second journal off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I have enjoyed participating in the IFCN. I think it's a very nice, useful organization, being the home for all the national societies for clinical neurophysiology around the world, having its main focus on education with the purpose of course, enhancing patient care.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason for the whole thing. I mean, the long-term goal is to improve patient care, and we do that by trying to bring the best practices by clinical neurophysiologists to the patients, and we try to do that by education. So that's the goal. And the main activities of the IFCN have been the journals and the congresses. We've also had a fellowship program, which I think has been quite successful also in terms of education.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, at the present time in our pandemic, we're having trouble with having international meetings.
Right.
or even national meetings for that matter. This time will pass, we presume, and we'll go back to that sometime in the future. In the meantime, there will be educational things that'll be on the new IFCN website. There will be some educational lectures that will be available there. Just last week, I lectured in 2 different topics for educational material that'll be free on the IFCN website. I actually am doing another one tomorrow morning, and other members of EXCO and other IFCN people will be doing the same. So in the absence of meetings, we'll have a certain amount of free education on the web. So I think the IFCN is doing what it can do to have education in a whole variety of ways and formats that will be the most useful for people. And we have, I hope, been successful in a lot of these things, and hope to continue carrying on doing all these things that, again, have the final goal of helping our patients.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for participating in this interview.
Happy to have done it, and good luck to you in your career.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, that is a good question. Of course, I'm in a particularly good environment at NIH for that purpose. We have, it is a huge operation there at NIH. It is the largest freestanding medical research institute in the world. And so we have a huge number of people who are expert in all different topics, with lots of courses and lectures and things that people can learn different things. But in terms of just trying to learn a new topic, I think in general, and if there isn't any local expertise in doing that, I think one has to find a course that where that can be learned. Now, there are lots of courses that have been taught in different topics. For example, you had mentioned machine learning. That's something that there are courses on that will be in different places. They used to all be live. There are a lot of these that are gradually shifting into online type stuff. The IFCN at the moment is doing largely basic stuff. But I think that you're right, that it would be very good to put a lot of advanced topics on the internet as well, wouldn't it? To have something like that would be advantageous to to different people. That would be a very good idea, actually. Now, there are special interest groups that, so this is another thing that is sort of developing. They started during my presidency, but we're now trying to push them a bit more. So there are special interest groups in different topics. There is one group that is particularly interested in EEG analysis. And that group is led by Claudio Babiloni, and that SIG will have free membership, and it'll have a localized blog on the IFCN website for people to talk with each other. So, for example, if you would join that SIG on EEG processing and say, look, really what I want to do more is learn about this technique or that technique, there might very well be someone on that blog who would say, oh yes, so in order to do that, the best thing to do is X, Y, Z. So that would sort of, get you get you connected with people with common interests. So that would be some of the different ways of thinking about how to go about doing it.